Now we're on top of breaking news. The big story today, the Supreme Court shot down President Trump's executive order restricting birthright citizenship, which grants U.S. citizenship to any person born in our country, regardless of their parents' immigration status. Your reporter Natalie Brand has reaction now from Washington.
The U.S. Supreme Court struck down President Trump's executive order to deny automatic citizenship to children born in the U.S. whose parents are in the country temporarily or illegally.
It was expected from the oral arguments. It was expected from the nature of this case and just how long this has been an accepted part of our constitutional culture.
The justices pointed to the Constitution's 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause, which states all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. The Trump administration had argued the amendment adopted after the Civil War was intended to grant citizenship to freed slaves and their descendants, not to the some 250,000 babies born each year to people here illegally.
It's tremendously destructive. It's extremely costly. I don't know, it's up to them. But in terms of for the good of the country, it'd be great if they didn't allow it.
In a sign of how important the issue was to him, President Trump attended oral arguments for the case in April, the first sitting president to do so.
Despite the weight the president has placed on this issue and his public statements following oral arguments, he seemed prepared for the high court to rule against him.
This decision by the Supreme Court is a very big one. They'll probably rule against me because they seem to like doing that.
The United States is not the only nation with the concept of birthright citizenship, but is one of the few. Around 36 countries in the world grant birthright citizenship to almost everyone. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.